dangerous, things that any soldier, even first in the country, would know not to do. So I interviewed him, talked to the psychiatrist by a phone link, and he told me to, see him for a couple of days, give him some rest, and at that time, what used to be called in World War II combat fatigue, we had come to call transient stress reactions, or I can't remember the other one. But basically it was just, more than anything, it was a result of being tired. And so I put him on the small ward that we had in the compound for about 3 days of rest, and then I saw him a couple more times. Turned out that he was having difficulties. He got a Dear John letter from his girlfriend, and that coupled with the fatigue, he just didn't really want to go on anymore. And the short term was that I managed to get him stabilized, and he returned to his unit, and it was only less than a month later I saw his personal effects come through. He'd been killed by a sniper, and that just broke my heart. It was one of those, what am I doing here kind of questions. But for the most part, it was just go day to day and survive the rocket attacks. And we did get a chance to see some Huey Cobras in action. There was a rocket that was thrown into our compound, and somebody happened to see where it came from. And 2 Huey Cobras came in, and they do this kind of dance where one comes down, swoops in, fires rockets and or miniguns, and those were impressive to see firing, while the other one circled around. And as soon as this guy was done with his pass, the next guy came down, and they just kept raining explosive ordnance on this position. I have no idea what happened to the guys. Even, they may have gone into their tunnels. There was a very intricate tunnel system all throughout the country, and the Viet Cong would disappear into a tunnel and come out somewhere else. A lot like prairie dogs, I guess, too. Oh, and one other was we were sitting having a group brainstorming session, and we were just in a room off the main medical facility, and they brought in a body bag that had a child who was perhaps 8 years old, who had been, I guess, killed by an explosive device. And I can still remember the stench as they opened that body bag. It was just upwind of us a little bit, and I just wanted to find someplace else to be very quickly. But that, again, that was one of those things that impressed on me, that life is fleeting. And I just noticed the sign in the front of the church on the way in, "We're not promised tomorrow. Yeah. Today is the day of salvation." That kind of impressed me. We're not promised tomorrow.
Okay, so do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, I think it was March 10th, 1971. My first child, my daughter, was 6 weeks old. And we moved immediately back here to Buffalo because both my wife and I were from here, and found an apartment and started getting used to life in the real world again.
How long did your service last?
I was in the Army for 3 years total. I was in Vietnam for 11 months of those 3 years. There was 2 months of basic training, 3 months of advanced training in Fort Sam Houston. Then there was some leave time in Vietnam, and back from Vietnam some more leave time. That's when I got married. We sandwiched that in, and then she and I headed off to Fort Devens, Fort Devens, where we spent the next roughly year and a half finishing up time.
Where did you go, like, after you came home, like, right after?
Oh, we lived in Cheektowaga, not terribly far either from my parents or her parents. And I can't remember the first job I had. I had a lot of short-term jobs that kind of got me along as we just tried to establish a family.
Okay. What did you do as your career after the war ended, or after you were done?
Would you repeat the question, please?
What did you do as your career after you came home?
I didn't really have a career. There were jobs just trying to, keep food on the table and take care of the kids and what have you. The thing that was probably most prevalent at the time is I worked as a custodian at Maryvale High School, which was my alma mater. For about 4 years, I was going to night school, attempting to get into UB and be a physical therapist. Failing that, then I ended up working in a jewelry store for a while, and then my late wife's brother-in-law worked as a supervisor at UPS, and he told me that they were hiring and encouraged me to give that a shot, which is what I did. And in 1977, I started driving for UPS. And after 29 years, in 2006, I retired. And I'm enjoying the life of leisure ever since.
Did any of your military experiences influence your thinking?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Now, first and foremost, the whole idea of the security that there is in learning how to be obedient, which of course has ramifications as far as Christianity goes. But just in life in general, it was one of the things that I taught my children. Do not question. Not to be a tyrant or anything like that, but if there was a time when I saw something that was potentially dangerous and barked out an order to them to do something to avoid that, they learned, do it. Don't turn around and ask why and get into a dialogue, just do it. But we had plenty of time for dialogue when situations were not dire, but there were times when that came in to be not just helpful, but vital. Respect for authority, which I don't see much in general these days. And the importance of friends.
Did you attend any reunions after?
Did I attend what?
Any reunions?
No, there were none, as far as I know. The time that I left Vietnam was during the time that Richard Nixon was president, and he was winding down the Vietnam conflict in similar fashion to what president is now in Afghanistan. And I think the results are very much similar, that it was in short order taken over by the North Vietnamese. They just simply overwhelmed what was left in the South Vietnam, and it became one united country under communism. I think it'll be not too long before Afghanistan is the same thing, just rather than communism, Islam, and Sharia law. But the unit that I was in was disbanded. It had been disbanded after World War II and was re-established for Vietnam for that time, but it was disbanded again after Vietnam, and to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been restarted again to date.
Okay, so is there anything else we haven't covered that you'd like to say?
Yeah, there was one thing that I've been hearing in the news, that there have been some programs of late to give acknowledgement to me and the other veterans of Vietnam, because the political climate when we were done with Vietnam was hostile. And in large measure, PTSD was undiagnosed at the time. It was something that was recognized but hadn't been studied and labeled. We had a lot of PTSD people who were not able to cope, and as a result, most Vietnam veterans were looked upon as ticking time bombs waiting to just freak out and kill somebody or injure somebody or do whatever. There were not a lot of parades, there were not a lot of welcome home celebrations. At the time, I didn't really care much, as long as my fiance was there to welcome me home and we got married, and incidentally, your marriage reminded me a lot of that. It was just something I got used to, but it's about time. There are some guys who needed that affirmation. And I didn't personally experience anybody really giving me that sideways glance of distrust or whatever. But it's comforting to know that somebody's trying to right a wrong. There's a lot of people who are not alive today who would have appreciated that at the time, but still, to redress that wrong, I think, is an important thing.
Okay, so we close there. All right, well, thank you for letting me interview you, and I guess that's all.
All right.
All right.
You're welcome.
That was good.